Hey everybody, welcome to part 3 in a series of videos for Fury of Dracula. Now in this third video I'm going to show you some actual gameplay. I'm going to try to go through a full week of the game, but the video starts dragging on a little bit too long. I may cut it short. But my general hope is to go through a full week of the game to show you exactly what the game looks like, so you get a rough idea of exactly how the game plays and see if this is a game that's going to be just right for you. Now before we go on to the video, there's two little things I forgot that I wanted to mention in my tutorial video. I just want to throw them out there very quickly. The first thing is I completely forgot to mention the allies. Now there are ally cards in the event deck. There's allies for our hunters and there's also allies for Dracula. Now each team, and I want to emphasize each team, not each player, but each team is allowed to have one ally on their side. And they get a new ally card and they want to play that ally card, they are forced to discard their current ally to replace with a new ally card. So that means the hunters do get one ally that's going to be placed on the board right here. And Dracula gets one ally too, but they're just basically going to place it down next to their Dracula card, reminding all the players that that ally isn't play until it's been discarded, destroyed, or pretty much dismantled in some way, shape, or form. The other thing I like to do, and this is something I get from playing the original first edition Fury of Dracula, is I actually like to play with the map, the Dracula map, and have a nice shield. I actually use the first edition shield for this, and play it, and use cubes, and I place these cubes down on top of all the cities as I travel around the world as Dracula. This does two things for me as a Dracula player. One, it stops me from telegraphing my intentions by looking at the board or doing a thing where I have to stop and pause when a hero moves close to a location. I have to think and say, is that a city I went through? And then I pretty much telegraph my intentions by starting to flip over cards. Of course, those are going to be flipped over in private, but that does give the adventurers, the hunters, the idea that maybe they're getting close to my trail. And I don't like telegraphing my intentions as a Dracula player because I like making life as difficult as possible for the hunters. And this is a secret movement game, and I like to keep things as secret as possible. So like I said, what I always do is I keep 6 orange cubes to remind me where all the trail locations are. I keep 3 cubes of a different color to remind me about where my lairs are. And I keep a final cube of a different color for various things, such as remind me when I hide, or to remind me when I use the wolf form if I remember what city I jumped over in case I want to forget or just need for some reason to remind myself of that thing. So I just keep the extra cube around, and it does come in handy sometimes. Now you use simple cubes that you get at any hobby store, or you can just go ahead and raid your copy of Through the Ages or anything like that, but any cubes are really great and something I suggest you do, especially if you want to prevent the players from having your intentions completely telegraphed. So those are the quick things I forgot in my overview video when I showed you how to play the game. Let's take everything down the table and start the game of Fury of Dracula, a hidden movement game between Dracula and the hunters. As you can see, we got everything all set up already. Our hunters are all starting in their various cities. We got one hunter over here in Madrid. We got one over here in Rome, one over here in Budapest, and we finally got one over here in Köln. We're going to have Dracula, who has a starting location right here. We're going to have that already placed down because we got everything set up. We're going to start on Monday, 0 influence. Dracula starts with his 5 encounter cards. Everything's basically set up. All the train tickets have been randomized. Everybody has everything set up. We're ready to go to start the very first round of Fury of Dracula. Now to make this a little more fun for everybody watching this at home, I'm actually not going to use the tokens that I normally do, and I'm not going to use the screen. So I'm going to leave it up to you to see if you can figure out exactly where Dracula happens to be traveling while we're going around the world. So let's go ahead and start with our very first turn during the day phase, because remember we skipped the dawn phase on the very first round of the game. So the first thing we need to do is we need to start with Lord Godalming, because remember we always have to go with all the hunters in order based on their cards. Remember, Lord Godalming goes first, Dr. John Seward goes second, Van Helsing is always third, and Mina Harker is always fourth, unless of course we happen to have the event card in play, allows us to break the rule, but obviously in the first turn of the game that's not going to happen. So in player order, every one of our players needs to pick their very first action. So the first thing we're going to do is start with Lord Godalming, and he's going to decide that he's going to choose to do the supply action. Now he's currently over here in Madrid right now, and he's going to do the supply action. So remember, his special ability is he does have the wealth power, so when he does the supply action, he actually has to draw 2 item cards. He's going to draw the 2 item cards. And remember, we don't show these to Dracula, but I'm going to show these to you, just so you can see exactly what we're getting. We're going to get the dogs card, and we're going to get fast horses, both item cards. And remember, we can't have more than 3, and we are drawing 2 just because of a special power of wealth. And remember, every time we do a supply action, if it's the daytime, we need to draw the top item card. If it's the nighttime, we're going to draw the bottom item card. So we're going to draw the top item card, and since it's one of the cards for hunters, we're going to draw this, and he's going to keep this card. Again, we don't show this to Dracula, but we're just going to flip it over for you people at home watching. And we're going to see that we're going to get the higher scarts card, which actually says that we have to play this card immediately. And this is actually a great card for our hunters to start off with early in the game, because it's going to give them a nice leg up on their hunt for Dracula. Basically, the Hired Scouts card says that the hunters, as a group, need to pick 2 cities. And they pick any 2 cities currently on the board, and then Dracula must go through his locations, whether it's his location in hand that he has, or all the locations currently on the trail, and he must reveal those cities. So, for example, if Dracula is in Prague, and this card right here happens to be Prague, if the hunters say Prague, we need to reveal this card right here and show it to the hunters. That would be a dead giveaway, letting the hunters know exactly where Dracula happens to be. So our hunters are going to go ahead and they're going to pick 2 cities really quick, and they need to decide or see if Dracula happens to be in those locations. The very first thing to do is we're going to pick Prague, and we're going to see if Dracula happens to be in that location. And Dracula's going to pull that out of his hand of cards, letting all of our hunters know that Dracula is currently not in Prague because this card is in his hand, not on the trail, so we know that Dracula is currently, at least currently, not in Prague. The hunters now need to pick a second city. Now remember, all the conversation between all of our players, unless they're exchanging item cards because they happen to be in the same location, all the conversation has to be out in the open for Dracula to hear. Now this is very thematic because it lets you know basically how the stories were where Dracula had spies everywhere. So players must discuss which second city they want to decide, and they're going to go ahead as a group and decide that they're going to pick the city of Barcelona. So again, Dracula's going to pull out his hand of cards, and he's going to pull out the Barcelona card, showing that Dracula is currently not in Barcelona. So now our hunters know of 2 cities in the game currently that Dracula is not at. Now granted, there is one of 60 cities it could have been in, but we know that this card is neither Prague and it's not Barcelona. So this event card has been played. It's going to be discarded and removed pretty much from the game unless we get that one event card that allows us to shuffle the entire discard all the way back into the event deck. But we can be pretty sure that most likely, unless we see that card, this card is probably not going to come back into play for this game. Now it's Dr. John Sewer's turn. He is currently over here in Budapest, and he is also going to decide that he's going to do a supply action. It's daytime, so that does mean he's going to draw 1 item card. Now remember, he's only going to get 1 item card because he doesn't have the special abilities of Lord who went first. And we're going to draw the Holy Bullets card. Now again, we don't show these cards to Dracula. This is just for everybody watching and playing along at home. We're going to see that he gets the Holy Bullets card. That's going to be his 1 item card. Then he needs to draw 1 event card. Remember, it is daytime, so we're going to draw the top card from the event deck, not the bottom card. And since we see it's one of the cards for our hunters, we're going to go ahead and take that card, again, not shown to Dracula. And we're going to get 2 options with this card because this can be the Newspaper Reports event card. Now, the Newspaper Reports card is a card that we can either play immediately for its immediate effect, or we can save it for a later time to play either during the dawn or the dusk phase. Basically what this says is if we play it immediately, then we get to reveal the location that's currently in the 3rd space of the trail. Well, there's no cards in the trail in the 3rd space. It'd be pretty much a waste to use that card at that time. So we're going to save this card to eventually play it for its dawn or its dusk phase power, which is going to allow us to reveal either the 5th or the 6th space of the trail, and that's going to be up to the option of the hunters. So again, this is a really nice card to have, but it's not going to help us at all at this point in the game. So this is going to be an event card that we're going to keep as Dr. John Seward. And remember, we can never have more than 3 event cards, no more than 3 item cards. So that's the end of Dr. John Seward's turn. It's now time to move to Dr. Van Helsing, who is currently over in Rome. For Van Helsing's turn, we're pretty much going to also try to decide to get some supplies because remember, our hunters are nearly powerless versus Dracula in hand-to-hand combat. So they need to start getting equipment, and they need to start getting these event cards to start tracking down where the Dark Lord is, and eventually get enough power to defeat him in combat between the evil Dark Lord. So again, Dr. Van Helsing is going to go ahead for his action over here in Rome. He's also going to take the supply action. So the very first thing we're going to do, again, because we're in a city, not a small town, we're going to pick one of the item cards, and we're going to see that we're going to gain the Holy Circle item card, which is a very powerful card that we use in combat. It's basically going to stop every one of Dracula's powers. That's how powerful this card is. It's a really nice card that can pretty much block any of Dracula's powers and then save one of the hunters, removing them from combat. This is a fantastic card to have early in the game where you're very, very weak against Dracula, and Dracula can very, very easily overpower our hunters. The next thing we need to do is we need to draw an event card. We're going to draw from the top from the deck because it is daytime, and we're going to see that we're going to get the Consecrated Ground event card, which is, again, a very powerful event card for our hunters. Our hunters are having a very fantastic start to this game of Fury of Dracula. The Consecrated Ground card is basically going to allow the hunters to create areas on the board where Dracula is forbidden from entering. Basically what we're going to do is this card is going to be played during the night phase, so we're not playing it now because remember we're still during the day phase. But during the night phase, we get to place a Consecrated Ground token on any city that we currently happen to be on, if we're Dr. Van Helsing using this item right here, we'd simply place it down on a city, and now for the rest of the game, Dracula cannot enter that city unless he manages to get the event card that allows him to get rid of consecrated ground. It's also going to allow the rest of the hunters to place heavenly host tokens in the various other cities, as long as they also have the heavenly host item card in their hand. And if they do, they're going to place these down in other cities also, again preventing Dracula from entering those cities. The difference is with the consecrated ground is Dracula's forbidden from entering that city for the rest of the game pretty much, unless he gets that lucky event card. With these holy host tokens, these are temporary. They're only going to last for one entire day, slowing down Dracula, but not preventing him from entering those cities during later turns. So again, this is a really, really nice event card for our heroes. Just going to go over to Dr. Van Helsing. Remember, we can't have more than 3 of them. Only Dr. Seward is allowed to break the rules of having up to 4 item cards and 4 event cards. All the rest of our hunters are restricted to a maximum of 3 item cards and 3 event cards. That's basically the end of Dr. Van Helsing's turn. We now get to go over to Mina Harker's turn. And she happens to be over here, remember, over here in Germany. Mina Harker is also going to play it safe for her turn. She's simply going to choose to do the supply action, which is not going to be quite as efficient for her, because we see that currently the top card of the event deck happens to be a Dracula card. So probably not the best thing in the world for her to do, but at least we're going to get rid of cards that Dracula can use and make his life difficult, possibly removing good cards from the event cards that he can eventually get into play. So we're going to start with our supply action. We are in a large city, so the first thing we're going to do is we are going to draw an item card. We're going to get garlic, which is a pretty decent combat weapon. But now we got to remember, as Mina Harker, remember she always has 1 bite token permanently for the game. And remember, anytime you have a bite token, you're weakened, and anytime you're weakened, you're required to play it with at least 1 item card face up, and always play with 1 event card face up at all times. So that garlic card is going to remain face up for the Mina Harker player. And then the top item of the event deck, because remember we're playing during the day phase, this card is actually going to be discarded, removing it pretty much from the game, again, unless that 1 event card comes up. That's going to allow us to shuffle our discard pile back into the event deck. That's the end of the day phase for all of our heroes. It's now time to move over to the dusk phase, where we move from day and move into night. Now remember, during the dusk phase, if we happen to have any tokens on the board, such as fog, such as lightning storms, or roadblocks, we'd have to remove those as a Dracula player. Remember, it's our choice which ones we want to remove, but we are required to remove 1 of each during the dusk phase as the Dracula player. And at this point, if any of our hunters happen to be in the same city as Dracula, a fight would now occur. Of course, that's not the case right now as we see the status of our board, so we're going to finish the dusk phase. And now we're going to move directly into night phase, where all of our hunters are going to take actions again in player order, except things are going to be a little different because we can no longer move. And if we decide to do a supply action, remember, we're going to start drawing cards from the bottom of the event deck, possibly giving Dracula some more power. This night phase is going to go actually pretty darn quickly for all of our hunters, because they're basically going to do all the same action, quite like they did during the day phase, except this is going to be a different action. Basically, every single one of our hunters is going to go ahead and claim a train ticket for every single one of our hunters. And I'll flip these over so we see exactly what we're getting. We're going to get a 2-2, which allows you to travel 2 on white tracks, or a combination of white and yellow, further distance of 2. We're going to have 3 and 2 for Dr. John Seward. We're going to have for Dr. Van Helsing a 2 and 2. And finally for Mina Harker, we're going to have also a 2 and 2. All of our hunters actually got some really good train tickets usable for them, allowing them to travel some vast distances across the board and cover quite a bit of ground, especially if they start getting some leads as to exactly where Dracula happens to be hiding. That is the end of the night phase for all of our hunters. It's now time for Dracula to take his turn. Now we get to the Dracula phase, and again, for the Dracula phase, there's a couple of things we need to do. We need to advance the trail. We need to start playing some encounter cards, possibly playing a rumor card if we want, and that's going to end the Dracula turn. So what we need to do for the Dracula turn is the first thing is we're going to advance the trail, moving down the next location, so Dracula is no longer at this location, unless, of course, we play a hide card, but that's something we're not going to tell the hunters. Next thing we need to do is we need to pick up all of our locations. If we want to travel by land, we're going to play a land card. And of course, if we want to travel by sea, we're going to play a sea card. And that's actually what we're going to do for the Dracula phase. We're going to play a sea card down on the table. Now remember, anytime we play a sea locations never ever get an encounter card. We're just basically going to place it down on the table. And anytime Dracula moves from a port, which we've done, into a sea location, Dracula's going to take a little bit of damage. So Dracula's going to take 2 points of damage, which isn't a lot of damage. Remember, we can take a total of 15. But we do need to start watching our hit points, because if we start traveling too long by sea, we're going to start taking quite a bit of damage, and if we're foolish enough, we can even kill ourselves by traveling by sea long enough. Of course, we're going to be a little bit smarter than that and not do something as foolish as to kill ourselves by traveling by sea. So we played a sea location. We can't play an encounter card. There's no rumor cards or tokens we want to play, so that's pretty much it for the Dracula phase. It's now time to move back to the Dawn phase and starting the next day of Fury of Dracula. Now during the Dawn phase, again, we always advance the timer like we've already done, and of course if any of our hunters happen to be in the same location as Dracula, they're going to have combat with Dracula since this would be the Dawn phase. Of course, that can't happen if Dracula is currently in the water. Remember, there's no event cards if we have any water spaces, so we can pretty much ignore that fact. And as a matter of fact, if we happen to move one of our hunters into the sea location where Dracula is actually currently at, we're not even going to reveal that location because remember, sea locations are never actually revealed. Matter of fact, the only main reason why we have different names on all these sea locations is so the Dracula player doesn't cheat and move to the same sea location twice in a row. So basically, we're going to start with our hunters all the way in player order. Now we have two decisions we can make as a group, as our hunters. And again, we got to make these decisions in front of the Dracula player. One, we can be pretty sedentary and just sit here and continue to supply our hunters, increase the amount of event cards, increase the amount of items, and possibly do other things and make themselves a little more powerful for the encounters with Dracula. Or they can take this time to start ruling out possible locations where Dracula happens to be at. We know for a fact, because we know how the game plays, that this card right here has to be a port city. So we look at all the possible ports in the game and see that Dracula has to be in one of these port cities. Well, we know he's not in Rome because we're currently in Rome, and that would have triggered an encounter with our hunters, so we know we can rule out Rome. So we can either move all of our hunters into some of these port cities and start ruling out where Dracula happens to be, or we can sit down sedentary and just start giving our hunters more supplies so they'll be better equipped to take out Dracula during the later turns. So our hunters as a group, they're going to decide to capitalize on the fact that they definitely know where Dracula could be and where they need to go to try to find him. Because remember, we know he's not in Barcelona because we played that event card earlier. We know he is definitely not in Rome. So we're going to, as our hunters, start moving around and try to figure out exactly which cities he definitely did not start the game with. So in order, we're going to start with Lord of Godalming. He's going to go ahead and do a move action. And he's going to go ahead and pick this city right here because it's a port city. And we're going to see if Dracula happens to be there. And the Dracula player is not going to reveal this card because Dracula was never there. Next player in player order is going to be Dr. John Seward. He's going to try to move to a port city, and we're going to see if there's any port cities he can reach. He can't do it by following any of the roads, but we do have a train token. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like there's any good train routes we can take that will take us to a port. The furthest we can get would be to Bucharest, which is not going to get us to any of these ports. So that wouldn't give us any clues there, but we could get all the way over to Vienna if we wanted to burn this train ticket. So what we're going to do is we are going to burn this train ticket. And now again, normally these train tickets are all going to be shuffled back in. So it's possible that we may get this train ticket again, but I'm not going to do that here because I'm just trying to do this very, very quickly. So we're going to burn our train ticket and we're going to take a train route. And remember, we can go 3 on the white or a combination of 2 on the white and the yellow. We're going to take a yellow track and we're going to travel 1, 2, and end up all the way over in Venice, which is also a port city. And then the Dracula player needs to reveal this if this happens to be in one of the locations that Dracula has been to. And that's not the location Dracula has been to, so nothing's going to be revealed, and that's going to be the end of Dr. John Seward's turn. We're now going to move over to Dr. Van Helsing, who needs to figure out where he wants to move. Now, we are currently over in Rome, so we have 2 port cities close by and accessible by train and also by roads that we can go to. Well, we don't want to burn that train ticket quite yet because it could help us in a future turn. So we're simply going to follow the roads and head over to Nepal and see if that's where Dracula's at. And that isn't where Dracula's at, so we're not going to reveal that. So we're finally just going to move over to Mina Harker, who's going to also move to a port. She has 2 choices between Hamburg and also between Amsterdam. And she's going to go ahead and move over to Amsterdam. And that is not where Dracula is, so we're not going to reveal that location on the trail. That's going to be the end of the day phase for all of our hunters. We're going to end the day, move into dusk, where again we'd have a combat with Dracula if that was a possibility. We'd also do a little cleanup if that was a possibility, but it's not. So the dusk phase is going to end and we're going to move directly into the night phase. Starting the night phase, we're going to start it right over here with player hunter number 1, who is all the way over in Lisbon right now, and which is a large city. So if he does a supply action, he is going to get an item card. He is going to decide that he's going to do a supply action. Remember, his special power is he gets to draw 2 item cards. Now he can't carry more than 3, so after he looks at all these 2 cards, plus the 2 item cards he already has, he needs to pick one of these item cards and decide to discard it. So we see that all these item cards are actually very, very good. We definitely do not want to get rid of the rifle because that's going to help us in combat versus Dracula. It's actually a weapon that can do quite a bit of damage to Dracula and stop him from using his claws and also flying away as a bat. We know the dogs card are really good for when you're doing searches because you get rid of saboteurs and other things that are event and encounter cards that actually stay on the trail after they're revealed, unless you manage to get rid of them with, rifles or dogs or other things along those lines. Stakes are also fantastic for taking care of vampires, and horses are also great for getting around across the board. Well, we're going to look at all these and decide that we're going to sacrifice the horses. They're going to be discarded. We're going to keep these other 3 item cards, because remember, that is the max amount of item cards that Lord Godalming can actually keep. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and grab our event card. Now remember, since it's now nighttime, we need to draw the event card from the bottom of the deck, and we're going to reveal a Dracula card. So the hunters, without looking at this card, need to hand this card over to the Dracula player, and then the Dracula player gets to look at this card again without revealing it to the hunters and see if it's a card we can play now or save for a later date. And as it turns out, we are very, very fortunate for the Dracula player, and we got one of the best Dracula cards, in my opinion, in the game, because what this card is going to allow us to do is it's going to prevent the day phase from happening on the next turn. And not only that, it's going to allow us to go through the discard pile and take all the Dracula cards out of the discard pile and shuffle them back into the event deck. So if you see one of your powerful cards that you really, really like and really, really want, you get at least shuffle back in the event deck and guarantee that there's a chance you'll at least see that card at a future date. Again, slowing down our hunters and making life much more difficult for them. This card can be played whenever we want as a Dracula player after our Dracula phase. Now remember, as a Dracula player, we can never have more than 4 event cards. So we're going to simply play this card down, add it to our hand of event cards. Remember, we can never have more than 4 event cards as the Dracula player. For the Dr. John Seward player, the only thing we're going to decide to do is we're going to go ahead and grab another train ticket because we burned our last train ticket, and it's always good to have at least one of those on hand. And we're going to gain a fairly decent train ticket, not the best in the world, but at least it's a decent train ticket. And this is when I'm actually going to remember that I should have drawn a second train ticket right here, because his other powers, whenever he reserves a train ticket, he actually gets 2 of them instead of 1 train ticket. So on the very first day on Monday, he should have actually got 2 of those. That was my error, but I'll go ahead and fix that right now because that is his special ability. Anyways, that'll be the end of Dr. John Seward's turn because he reserved a train ticket. We get to move over to Van Helsing right now, who again, remember, is over here in Venice. And we need to figure out exactly what he wants to do. And I'm sorry, he's over here, and we'll figure out what his action is for the turn. We're going to decide to be a little bit risky and decide that we do need some more equipment and we need to get some better supplies. So we are going to do a supply action. Luckily, we are in a large city, so it shouldn't be a problem for us. So we get to draw an item card. We're going to gain a pistol, a very, very nice item to use in combat versus Dracula. And then again, we need to go to the event deck, draw the event deck from the bottom of the event deck, and we're going to get another Dracula power, which is going to be handed over to the Dracula player, who's going to be very happy with all these wonderful cards that they're starting to gain right now, especially now that we're gaining a roadblock card. Now remember, this card is not going to be shown to our hunters. It's going to go directly to the Dracula player, who needs to figure out if it's a card they can play or if it's a card they want to play right now. Now the roadblock card is actually pretty nice for the Dracula player, but it'd be pretty terrible to use it right now. We can play it immediately or save it for the Dracula phase. If we play it right now, we can start placing some roadblocks along all these roads. And the nice thing about roadblocks is they create roads that the hunters cannot pass until that roadblock token has been removed from the board. And remember, those are going to be cleaned up during every one of the dust phases for the Dracula player who gets to pick when these get removed. But unfortunately, since we're traveling by sea, it's pretty, well, maybe decent to play it, but it's probably not a great idea to do it right now. Of course, we could do it as a bluff if we wanted to. For example, if we wanted the hunters to start thinking that we might be over here in this city right here, we can place a roadblock right here, making this player think that we place a roadblock there because we don't want the hunters to know that we start in the city. Or we cannot do that. Again, that's up to us. And again, we can keep up to 4 of these cards. So we're going to keep this card. We're not going to spend it. And that's going to be the end of the Dr. Van Helsing turn. We're now going to do the Mina Harker turn, who's also going to take a supply action. And again, since she is in a large city, she will take an item card. She's going to gain a crucifix. And now she has an option at this point. She can leave the garlic face up and actually keep this card face down, or she can reverse the cards, which one she leaves face up and which one she leaves face down. It's probably going to be better for us at this point to leave the Garlic card face up, because remember, Mina is weakened. She always has that bite token. And that does mean this Crucifix card we're going to leave face down, and Dracula doesn't know that's the card we drew. Then after that, we get to get an event card, and hopefully it's not going to be a Dracula card. And unfortunately, the luck for the Hunters is starting to wear out, even though they had some great luck at the start of the game. We have another event card for Dracula to gain. The Wild Horses card is a pretty darn nice. Well, I should say that all the event cards in this game are very nice, but this is going to be a nice one for Dracula to have this early in the game. Because what this card is going to allow us to do is anytime one of the Hunters moves by roadway, we can kind of change their eventual destination by playing this event card on the Hunters. Not a card we're going to play right now because it's nighttime, they're not doing any movement. And again, we have 3 event cards, the max amount we can have is 4. So we're okay on that aspect, and that's going to be the end of the Mina Harker's turn. That also ends our night phase. It's now time for Dracula to take his action, so we're going to slide his trail down 1 each way, and then we're going to place another location card down at this location, and Dracula is again going to decide to travel by sea. So since we're going from a sea location to another sea location, we're only going to take 1 point of damage. So again, we have to be careful. We've now taken 3 points of damage, leaving us with 12 hit points left over, and then we simply need to place an ocean card, or I'm sorry, a sea card down to show our current location. We're simply going to place our sea space down right here. And now remember, every time we play a sea card, we cannot place an encounter card on it. So we still have our 5 encounter cards we started the game with, because we cannot place them down here. And the only way we're going to be able to draw more encounter cards is by using one of our special powers, which we're not going to do. So now we've given another hint to our Hunters who need to figure out exactly where we are on the board. They know that we are now traveling by sea, so we're at least 2 sea zones away from the city that we started in. So now all the Hunters need to start looking at all the locations, looking at all the sea zones, and looking at all the locations that we could possibly be, where we could have started from, and where we could possibly be traveling to. And again, the Hunters need to discuss this in open in front of Dracula, who can start taking advantage of all their discussions to decide if he wants to start going to land, or again remain at sea for some future turns. The trick here is, though, is as long as we're remaining at sea, we are not gaining any influence at all at this point, so we are currently hamstringing ourselves. And we're also taking damage, so we definitely need to move back to land very soon. Maybe not the next round, but we definitely need to start thinking about moving back to land very, very quickly. It's now time to move and advance the time track back to the dawn phase, and we're now at Wednesday morning at the start of the dawn phase. There's not going to be any encounters between our Hunters and Dracula, because remember, Dracula is currently at sea, and we never fight Dracula when he's at sea. So he's basically safe during this dawn phase, and there's no cleanup to move to, so now we get to move to our day phase. Now, during our day phase, our Hunters would love to use the event card that's going to allow them to put out the Heavenly Host and consecrate some ground, because it's going to make it much more difficult for Dracula to go to land, and when he does go to land, it's also going to narrow all the locations where he can possibly go to land at. The trick here is we don't want to use this card yet because none of our Hunters have any Heavenly Host item cards right now, and that card won't be quite as powerful as they'd like it to be. So our Hunters, as a group, have decided that they're going to do a couple more supply actions after moving around and trying to narrow down, figure out exactly what this port city is that Dracula started in. Because if we figure out what this port city is, we can basically try to figure out what these 2 sea locations are. So we have 2 things we want to do as the Hunters now that we have started the official day phase, move past dawn. We need to figure out which one of these port cities that Dracula has used, and then we need to start figuring out ways to start getting some of these Heavenly Host item cards, so we take very good advantage of this Consecrated Ground event card. Now, Hunters as a group, they know that there's a couple things for them going in their favor. Right now, they know that Dracula has 3 event cards. He can only gain 1 more event card before he has to start discarding them and using them up. And remember, Dracula only has half as many event cards as our Hunters do. 1/3 of this deck is for Dracula, 2/3 is for the Hunter players. So we know as Dracula we have limited reserves, even though we do have that card that's going to allow us to get some of those event cards back in. But the Hunter players do not know this. But we also know, as the Hunters, we need to start narrowing down those port cities, because if we figure out where Dracula started from, we can probably figure out which one of the seas he went to, and again start making his life very, very difficult. So our Hunters know that if we move during the day and then supply at night, Dracula is not going to get that many event cards because he can only gain 1 more. So again, we're going to start pushing our luck and start moving around during the day, and again supplying at night. Even though supplying at night is going to possibly give Dracula more event cards, we're still going to hedge our bets and take that chance. So we're going to start very first, player number 1, who's going to move right over here. He's going to move from Lisbon all the way down to this city right here, which is a port city. and we're going to figure out if Dracula happens to be in that city. Unfortunately, what our hunters don't know is that Dracula does have a card that he's going to go ahead and play and make life difficult for all of our hunters. The Dracula player is going to play the Wild Horses card, which means before I reveal this city, if that city happens to be this location right here, before I reveal it at all, I get to choose where this hunter is going to be moved to, and now I have two options where I can move him to. I can move him to this very large city. When he supplies, he's going to get an item card out of it, or I can move him to this small little town, which means when he supplies, he's not going to get an item, he's simply going to get a draw from the event deck, making his turn much less efficient. So we're going to be a mean Dracula player. We're going to play the Wild Horses event card, and then this poor hunter is going to be moved all the way over to this small little town, ending his turn. And again, if this city was one of the cities on the track, we'd have to reveal it. But since the hunter technically never landed in this large city at all, even if that large city happens to be this location, we don't have to reveal it because thanks to that event card, this hunter never ever arrived in that city. Now, was that a bluff play by Dracula because we don't want to reveal this city? Or are we just trying to fool the hunters? Well, that's up for the hunters to try to figure out. Dr. Seward is going to decide to move by road and head over to Genoa, and this city is not Genoa, so we're not going to reveal it as a Dracula player. That's the end of Dr. John Seward's turn. We're going to now move over to Dr. Van Helsing's turn, who is going to move over to this port city, and this port city is also not this location, so we're not going to reveal that location at all. And then finally, we're going to move over to Mina Harker, who's going to make a movement. She's going to move from Amsterdam all the way to Brussels, and that's going to end her movement. That's going to end the day phase for all of our hunters. We're now going to move to the dusk phase, where we're going to do some cleanup, possibly do some encounters if that was to happen. And it's not, because Dracula is happily floating along by sea in his very large boat, in his coffin, safe from the hunters. During the night phase, we're going to move with all of our hunters, all in order. They're going to take their actions. We're going to start with Lord Godalming. And again, since he is in a small town, when he does the supply action, he doesn't actually get an item card, so he may not want to supply. So he has a couple options of what he can do, because he knows that the chances are he's going to get an event card that he can use, or he's going to get an event card that Dracula can use. So we need to hedge our bets, decide if that's what we want to do, or we can possibly look for some better train tokens. Since we actually have a train token that's not the best in the world, but we do have a decent one. And remember, every time we get train tokens, if we have more than we can carry, we need to discard before we do the draw, which means we can potentially get some bad train tokens. So it looks like all of his decisions are either not so good or not so good. So it's 50-50 odds. Let's go ahead and take an event card with a supply action. Because remember, we're not going to get an item card. We're going to draw another event card, and we're going to get another Dracula card, which makes life very difficult for all the hunters. This event card is actually a very good defensive card for the Dracula player. The Dracula player can play it at any time to cancel cards, such as the hired scouts. If the hunters play a card such as this, it's immediately going to be canceled without taking effect. So this is a really great card for the Dracula player. We'll add it to our hand of event cards. We're back up to 3 event cards. That's going to be the end of his turn. We're going to now move to Dr. John Seward's turn, who is also going to do a supply action. Now, Dr. Seward does happen to be in a large city, so when he supplies, he is going to draw 1 item card. We're hoping for a heavenly host, and we got one. So happily, we're going to take this heavenly host card, add it to our hand of item cards, because remember, we can have a max of 4 of them. Then we need to draw another event card from the bottom of the deck, and we're finally going to get an event card for our hunters at the nighttime. Now, the Jonathan Harker card is a fantastic card, event card for our hunters, especially in the early part of the game. Sure, we can play it right now to reveal one of the cities, much like the Scouts card did earlier, or we can use this as a permanent ally to help us for the rest of the game. And until Dracula manages to discard this card, it's going to help us quite a bit. Basically, what this card is going to do is, if we play it as an ally, is anytime a card goes off the trail, whether it matures or not, or whether the matured effect says that we have to reveal the card or not, it doesn't matter. Anytime a card moves off the trail, we have to reveal it to our hunter players. So this is a fantastic ally card for our hunters. Again, things are starting to look much, much better for our hunter players. Van Helsing is going to decide that he's going to do a supply action, and since Van Helsing is currently in a small town, the only thing he can do is he can get an event card. So we're going to take that back. We're not going to do that. We don't want to risk getting any more cards to the Dracula player, because he can use that card. And since we are in a small town, it's not going to give us an item card anyway, so we're not going to worry about that. We're simply just going to decide that we're going to take a train token, and unfortunately we're not going to get a very good train token, but we are allowed to keep a total of 2 train tokens. That's going to be Van Helsing's turn. We're now going to move over to Mina Harker, who is in a large town, she is going to supply. She's going to draw an item card, gaining a knife, and again, this can be played face down, since we only have to keep one of those cards revealed at a time. And then we're going to reveal the next event card, which is going to be a Dracula card, giving him the access to more roadblocks. So this roadblock card is going to go to the Dracula player. They're going to have a max hand of 4 cards. We have 4 event cards, so if we gain any more as a Dracula player, we do need to play one of these cards, or we'll be forced to discard one, because we can have more than 4 event cards. That's going to be the end of all of our Hunter phases. It's now time to start the Dracula phase. The Dracula player sees that all of our hunters have managed to spread themselves out quite a bit, and he sees that much of this whole entire region of all of Europe is very, very open, allowing him to travel very freely all across Europe if he happily wants to, and he can stay away from these hunters, start playing vampires all over the place and making their life very, very difficult. So what Dracula's deciding to do is he's going to, of course, we always move our layers down one at a time, and then Dracula's going to decide that he is going to go ashore and start making life difficult for all of our hunters. Remember that our current location is going to be a land location. We are going to place it down in the first location, and this is now the land location where Dracula is currently at. And since we went back to shore, we're not going to be taking any more damage from traveling by sea, because remember, as long as Dracula is at sea, he's going to continue to take damage. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to play an encounter card down right on top of that current location. And now we have a land space with an encounter card on it. We always have to have at least 5 encounter cards in our hand. So we'll draw back up to 5 encounter cards. Look at the encounter card we got. That's going to be pretty much it for the Dracula player. Dracula's turn is over. It's now time to move back to the dawn phase. And it's now Thursday during the dawn. Nothing's going to happen during the dawn, so we're now going to move back to Thursday morning. It's now the day phase for all of our hunters, and we're going to start moving them one by one. So Lord Godalming gets a choice. He can move to one of these neighboring cities. He can use one of his train tickets. He can claim some more train tickets or whatever he wants to do. But he wants to definitely go figure out why this city is one of the cities that Dracula player did not want him to explore. So we're going to move over here, hopefully hoping that we're going to call Dracula's bluff. And unfortunately, we are calling his bluff because it was 100% a bluff, because that is not where this location is. So the Lord Godalming player gets to be a little bit frustrated because, again, we have no idea where Dracula started and where he currently is at. So now we're going to move over to Dr. John Seward. Dr. John Seward is over here. We're going to move from Genoa and decide we're going to move over to Marseilles. Still not where we happen to be for the Dracula player, so all of our hunters are starting to get very, very frustrated trying to figure out exactly where the Dracula player happens to be hunting. So we're going to move over to Van Helsing, who decides that he's going to take off by sea because he's going to start searching over here, again, trying to pick up the trail for Dracula. And then finally, Mina Harker gets to go, and we have a couple different options. We move back into Germany, assuming that maybe Dracula might have taken it ashore and gone into Hamburg, or we can go over here to Britain and find out that's exactly where Dracula happened to start. Or we can just continue to move around this area and see if he's hiding around in France somewhere. So those are the decisions we need to make, and we need to decide what we want to do very, very quickly. Well, what we're going to decide that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and move over here to Le Havre, because 2 things are going to happen here. 1, we're going to rule out a port, and 2, we're going to manage to get this hunter eventually in the same location as Mina Harker, and we're going to use our special power to see if we can narrow down exactly where Dracula happens to be hiding. So that's the day phase for all of our hunters. We now get to move over to dusk, where we do some cleanup, possible encounters with Dracula, which is not going to happen. So now we get to start the night phase. Starting with the night phase, we're going to decide that we don't like our low amount of tickets right here, which do not give us quite a bit of movement, or at least not enough movement that's going to make us happy. So we're going to discard these tickets, and again, his special power is anytime he gets tickets, he gets to grab 2 of them. So we're going to grab tickets, and we're going to get 1 improvement and 1 not so much of an improvement, but at least we have 1 better ticket for us, and that's a better action than trying to supply, because we already have 3 very good item cards we want, and we don't want to risk giving any more event cards to the Dracula player, even though he is quite at his max, so we don't have to worry about too much, but this is a better decision, at least for us at this point. Next thing we're going to do is move down to the Dr. John Seward player, who is all the way over here, and he's going to decide that he is going to take a supply action because he does not have a max amount of items. We're going to draw an item card. We are going to get a pistol, which is going to be very, very nice for us. And then we have to make the dreaded draw from the bottom of the event deck, and again, we're going to get another Dracula card. Now, Dracula already has 4 event cards, so he needs to either look at all of his cards and play one of them, unless he has one that does say play immediately, which this card actually says, so we don't need to worry about it, because we now have the Vampiric Influence card in play. The vampiric influence card is actually going to allow us to make life very, very difficult for one of the hunters. We need to pick one hunter who is weakened. And unfortunately, only vampires, or the only hunter who is currently weakened is Mina Harker. But that's okay. We can definitely take advantage of this. She needs to reveal all of her item cards to us. Then we're going to look at all these item cards and decide that we don't like her having this crucifix because, crosses hurt us because we are Dracula. We're going to force her to discard that item. This event card is going to be discarded. Again, she has to play with one of these cards face up at all times. The other one she can put face down. And then we can decide that we can move her to any city we want as long as it's adjacent by road. And we're going to make her life difficult and move her all the way back to Brussels, showing our mastery over her weakened state. So that's going to be the end of the Dr. John Sewer's turn. We're now going to move to Van Helsing. And since he happens to be in a water space, and it's also nighttime, he has to pass. He does not get to take any actions at all. And now we get to move back to Mina Harker, who is going to go ahead and decide that she does want to supply. She'll gain an item. She'll gain dogs, which is actually pretty nice for her. And then she also needs to draw from the bottom of the deck. We're going to get another Dracula event card, making me wonder if I should reshuffle these event cards. But we're going to get the false tip event card face up. Now again, we don't reveal any event cards to any of our hunters, but at this point we do have too many event cards in our hands, so we need to look at all the event cards that we currently have, and we need to either find one that we can play now, or we're going to be forced to discard back down to 4 event cards. All the event cards we have are very, very nice, but we do have some duplicates, so we're going to go ahead and get rid of the roadblock card, discard that, and again, we're not showing any of these cards to the hunter players. We're going to have our maximum of 4 cards. That's going to be it for the Dracula player. That's the end of the night phase. For the Dracula phase, it's now time for Dracula to start moving again. We need to advance the trail down. Remember, every single card is going to move over 1 space, and counter cards stay on their current locations. And then Dracula needs to move again. Well, Dracula is going to go ahead and move by sea again, causing a lot of problems for our hunters, making them wonder exactly what Dracula's game is, where he's hiding, and trying to figure out exactly what Dracula's up to. Dracula's also going to take this time to go ahead and play a rumor card on top of this encounter card. Now this could be a bluff or it could be a time bomb that Dracula has laid because he's pretty safe and secure that the hunters are not going to figure out where this location is before it can mature, if that's a vampire, gaining us some influence, bringing us closer to winning the game. We now get to move back to the dawn phase, and then for the dawn phase, the hunters are going to surprise Dracula by playing one of their cards that they've been holding on to for quite a while. This card says that we can play it during the dawn or the dusk, and this is the newspaper reports card. It says reveal the location card on either the 5th or the 6th spot of the trail. Well, we have been desperately trying to figure out exactly where Dracula started, so we're going to play this card and force Dracula to reveal exactly what the starting city was that Dracula chose at the start of the game. Now, all of our hunters get to see that Dracula started in Athens, and we know that from Athens he traveled by boat twice, went to land, and then traveled by boat again. So now they need to figure out exactly just where Dracula is currently hiding. Figuring out that we went from sea to sea, so we know that Dracula definitely did not go this way. So Dracula either went to this sea, and then this sea, and then went to land, or he went to this sea, and then went to land somewhere over here. But that's something the hunters need to figure out, and we now have a great clue where Dracula started, where Dracula could currently be hiding, and now we need to take advantage of our knowledge and track down the evil Dark Lord. For the day phase, our hunters decide that they need to get ready to start spreading across the map, especially to figure out exactly where Dracula's trail is, because we now have a lot of clues to where Dracula could possibly be. So we're going to move along this city, trying to get to this city right here, which is going to allow us to supply and also get us on a railroad track, which is going to allow us to start moving very, very quickly, thanks to our very nice tickets that we have. Dr. John Seward is also going to take his turn. He's going to stay in this location right here. He is going to take a supply action. Now, unfortunately, he does have 3 item cards right now, and these are all very good items that we definitely like, but actually, we're going to take that back. We're going to decide that we are going to do a movement action. I think that's actually a better action for us. So we're going to keep all of our item cards because we have some very good item cards right now. Instead of doing that, we are going to simply take a train ticket, and hopefully we're going to get a good train ticket. Unfortunately, we're not. It was a little bit of a gamble. We were hoping we can help ourselves. But that is going to be the end of this hunter's turn. We now get to move to Van Helsing. And since he has out of sea space, he is required to move. That's the only action he can take. Now we have 2 decisions we need to make as Van Helsing. We know that Dracula started in Athens and then traveled by sea twice. So he could have went to sea here, and then went to this sea, and then went to one of these 3 port cities. Well, we know he never went to this port city right here because this location would have been revealed while we were there, and that did not happen. So we know that Dracula either went here, then to one of these two port cities, or he moved into this sea right here and then went into one of these port cities. And we're not quite sure exactly what he did yet, so we're going to go ahead and take a chance. And we're either going to pick this city to move to, or we're going to pick this city to move to. We're going to take a chance in figuring that Dracula is most likely on not this section of the map at all. We're going to go ahead and land in Venice right here, and this card is not going to be revealed, so we know that Dracula did not go to Venice at this location. So that's going to be the end of Van Helsing's turn. We're now get to go to Mina Harker's turn, who is going to go ahead and decide that she wants to take a supply action. Now, she does have 3 item cards in her hand, but she does want to get this event card, which could possibly help our heroes. Or we can decide to play it safe and possibly set ourselves up to figure out where Dracula may not be when he comes back to land again. And that may actually be a better decision for us. So we're going to go ahead as the Mina Harker and burn this train ticket right here. And this is going to allow us to move up to 2 on the white tracks or 2 on the yellow tracks, combination of yellow and white. We're going to use it to move along the white train tracks, and we're going to move to 1, 2 cities, and we're going to go ahead and move to this city right here, allowing us to use our special power at a later turn for 1 action. We can figure out exactly if Dracula happens to be in this location when he does go back to land. So that's going to be the end of the day phase. We're going to move over to the dusk part of the turn. We don't have any combats to worry about. We don't have any cleanup to worry about, so let's go ahead and move immediately to the night phase. So starting with the night phase, we're going to start over here. We're going to figure out exactly what he wants to do. He's going to decide that he does definitely want to supply. So we're going to look at 2 item cards. We're going to place them face up. And then we have to reveal all of our cards right here. Again, not revealing them to the Dracula player. But we do need to look at all these cards, because remember, we can never have more than 3 item cards. Now we have to discard. We definitely know that we definitely want the rifle. We're liking having the stake. So now it's going to be a toss-up between these 3 cards. Which ones do we want to keep? We keep the garlic, which will help us in combat. But we do also have the rifle, which will help us in combat also. Although the rifle doesn't stop us from being bitten. And being bitten can make us very, very weak. Or we can keep another stake, or we can keep the dogs. Well, we're not going to worry about the dogs because we're having trouble tracking down Dracula's trail so far. And it's just not helping us right now. We definitely don't need 2 stakes. So we're going to go ahead and discard those. We're going to keep the garlic, the stake, and the rifle as our 3 item cards. And then the next thing we need to do is we get into go ahead and draw an event card. And we're going to draw an event card for our heroes, finally, again. And we're going to get the surprise and return event card. This is a really nice event card for our hunters to keep, especially if they happen to lose this ally, because that's actually a pretty powerful ally, and definitely not an ally we want to risk losing anytime soon. So now we get to move over to the John Seward player, who is also going to do a supply action. We're going to look at the top item. Remember, he can carry up to 4 items. That's his special power, so even though we have 3 items, we're not forced to discard, so we're going to get the fast horses, which would be really nice. And then we're going to draw the bottom item of the event deck. And again, it's going to be a hero event card. We're going to get the planned ambush card. The planned ambush card is really great in case we get into combat with Dracula, which is something we eventually want to do. So this is going to go into our hand. And these aren't played face up. I'm just leaving them face up to save my sanity, so I remember which one of our hunters has each one of these event cards when I play them, just for the sample game. So just remember, these event cards always stay face down in the player's hand. I'm just leaving them up so I remember which hunter has each one of these cards. So that's going to be the end of the Dr. John Seward's turn. We now get to move to Van Helsing. Van Helsing is unfortunately in a small town, so he has a couple different options of what he can do. He's going to go ahead and decide that he's going to supply with a train ticket, because this 1 train ticket is just not helping him that much. We're going to draw a train ticket, and we're going to get a little bit of a better train ticket. That's going to be in the Van Helsing's turn. We now get to move to Mina Harker. Now, Mina Harker could use her special power to let her know that Dracula is not currently in this region. Because we know he's not in this region because, well, Dracula is currently at sea, so that'd be pretty darn obvious at this point. So we're not going to do that. We're simply going to also look for a train ticket, and we're going to get a pretty darn decent 3-2 train ticket, which is one of the best train tickets in the game. So that's a pretty good decision for us. That's going to be the end of the night phase. We now get to move back to the Dracula phase. During the Dracula phase, we need to advance all of our trail here, but before we do that, I did forget to take 2 points of damage when Dracula went back to sea, so I'll go ahead and fix that very quickly. And we'll take 2 more points of damage, because remember, we are at sea right now, and anytime we go from land to sea, we take 2 points of damage. So now we're going to go ahead and we are going to advance the trail for all of our locations and moving Dracula to another location. So now that Dracula has taken about a third of his life, it's probably not a good idea to remain at sea anymore, because it's going to continue to hurt us. Plus, we want to start getting some more of these encounters out there, because those encounters are pretty much the only way we're going to start getting influence, because we need to start getting those vampires out there. So the Dracula player is going to go ahead and land on some land and play an encounter card, laying out a trap for our hunters. So the first thing we need to do is we need to lay down the location card as our current location, as our current hideout. Then we're going to look at all of our encounter cards, and we're going to go ahead and play an encounter card on top of that location, and hopefully we're going to spring a trap for our hunters. After we play down our encounter card on top of our current location, we may need to make sure that we draw our hand back up to 5 encounter cards, because we always have 5 encounter cards in our hand as Dracula, unless of course we use one of our special powers that will give us some extra encounter cards. So now that we're done with that, we are done with the Dracula phase. It's now time to move back to the Dawn phase, where we do some cleanup, possibly fight with Dracula if we was at one of those locations, but he currently is not. So we don't need to worry about that. So we're going to move on to the day phase, and all of our hunters get to start taking their turns again in player order. So starting with number 1, Lord Godalming, he's going to take his action, and he is going to move. Now he's going to try to be sly and try to figure out exactly where Dracula happens to be. We know that Dracula started over here in Athens, and we know that he moved by sea twice. He went possibly here and then went here, or he possibly went here and then here. But we know that's not exactly the case, because he played another sea card afterwards. So we know he did not go to Valona, because there's no seas he can play after that, because there's only one sea connected to Valona, and that sea card is definitely not that sea card right there. So using process of elimination, we know that Dracula definitely went to this sea, then to this sea, and then he went to land, and then he went to sea again. So he possibly could have went to Rome, but that would put him back out to this sea right here, which would not help him at all. So we know that he did not go there. He could have went over here to Cagliari. Sorry, I'm going to pronounce that wrong. He could have went to this town right here, and then from there went back out to sea afterwards. And that could mean that he could possibly have landed either at this location right here, or this location, or this location. Well, we know he did not go to this location because there's already hunters there. So we know that Dracula just possibly went to sea either here in Barcelona or in Alicante. So we're going to hedge our bets, and we're going to move over here to Alicante, and we're going to see if that's currently where Dracula is at. And Dracula is going to go ahead and reveal his current location, showing that he is indeed in that location. And not only that, he has set a trap for our hunters. He has played out the unnatural fog card, which is going to be a trap for our hunters. This is actually a pretty powerful trap for Dracula to lay for our hunters, because it's the day phase. So 2 things are going to happen. 1, we're going to gain 2 fog tokens in the city right now, which is going to make life difficult for our hunters, because when there's fog tokens, they cannot enter or leave those towns at all, or cities. Not only that, since it happens to be the daytime, and we see that it's currently Saturday morning, he's also going to be delayed, which means he's going to be laid flat down on his back and delayed. And then this card, since it is actually a used event card, is actually going to be discarded and removed. It's not going to get its mature effect, but it's actually done exactly what we wanted to do. It's allowed us to lay a trap for our hunter, and it's also going to possibly allow us to feed on a hunter, gaining back some of that lost life points that we've lost in this journey across the sea. Now remember, combat with Dracula doesn't happen except during the dawn or the dusk phase, so we know that this hunter is not going to go into combat with Dracula. He's actually going to go into combat with Dracula during the night, or actually during the dusk phase, so he is going to be at a little bit of a disadvantage in the combat versus Dracula. So now on to Dr. John Seward. He's at this location. He was going to stay there in hopes of helping Mina Harker use her power, but we don't need to do that, because we know that Dracula is currently in this location right here. So using her power to figure out if Dracula isn't here is pretty much a waste of our action. So we want to figure out a way that we can get over there and help this hunter defeat Dracula. So we need to look at all of our movement powers, look at all the train tracks, and figure out if there's any way that we can get over there and help this hunter in his battle versus Dracula. So we're going to look at all of our event cards and see if we happen to have any fast horse cards. We do have a fast horse card, but is it enough to help us get at least close enough to get to Dracula? Now the fast horse card is going to reveal one of these ticket locations. But the maximum it can allow us to do is move up to 2 spaces, and the chances of us getting that, is it even going to be worthwhile, because we're not going to be able to get close enough to help our fellow hunter versus Dracula, so it's going to be pretty much a waste, so we're not going to use the fast horses action. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and burn this ticket, which allows us to move up to 2 spaces along railroad tracks, to move 1, to go ahead and move 2, which is going to put us over in this port city, hopefully making life more difficult for Dracula, because we know that he cannot retreat to the sea, because that sea is already out. So the only places he can go to is he can go head over here to this town right here, this town right here, or this town. So at least puts us a little bit closer to attacking Dracula and making his life much more difficult. Next thing we got is Dr. Van Helsing, who's also going to move and take advantage of some of his train tickets. So he needs to figure out what he can do to get quickly moving, to get as close as he can to Dracula before Dracula can start making life more difficult and before he can disappear back on his trail again. So what we're going to go ahead and do as the as the Van Helsing player, is we're going to move one city over to Milan, and then finally we're going to go over to Mina Harker, who is in this city right here, and she's actually going to figure out how she can get closer. And she does have this nice railroad pass right here. She's going to discard this railroad pass right here, which allows her to move up to 3 white train tracks. So she's going to go 1, 2, 3, ending up right here, getting ever so much closer to where Dracula may be. And now remember, he can only travel so far when his turn comes back. He has to actually travel by land. He cannot go back to sea because that sea card is right there, so we know that we have him trapped on land, at least a little bit for now. That's the end of the day phase for all of our hunters. We now get to move to the dusk phase, where we now have an encounter between Dracula and one of our hunters. The first thing we need to do before we do anything is the Dracula player, since we're now going to be in a combat with a hunter, is he needs to draw 5 combat cards. And then the hunter player needs to grab 1 escape card, 1 dodge card, 1 punch card, plus all the current item cards they currently have in their hand. And now each one of our players needs to figure out 1 card they're going to play, because all of our hunter and Dracula are both now in combat. The hunter player knows that Dracula needs to bite him, so what he needs to do to get some hit points back, because Dracula is hurt. So what he's going to do is he's going to play a card down, hopefully in an effort to stop any bites from happening. And then, of course, Dracula is going to place his combat card. Once both the combat cards have been placed, both of our players, our hunter and Dracula, are going to reveal their cards, and we're going to see if the symbols match to see if anything's canceled. So Dracula played a claws card, and there's no claw symbol on this card, so his claws card is definitely going to go off, and its effect is going to occur versus the hunter. So the first thing that happens with the claws card is the hunter is going to take 2 points of damage, since his attack was not blocked because he didn't play a card that blocked the attack. And then the second part of the card is going to go off, since he is in combat during the night phase with this hunter, so he's also going to take an additional 2 points of damage. Now, fortunately for a hunter, the garlic power is going to go off, which says that if Dracula used any of his claws or his fangs powered, then Dracula is also going to take damage. So Dracula is now going to take 2 points of damage, putting him at 7 points of damage, meaning that he's almost lost half of his life. Now this card has gone into effect. It's going to be flipped over, so we can track how many combat rounds have occurred. And this card is also going to stay face up. The hunter cannot use this card yet. He has to play a different card from his hand. And then Dracula simply needs to draw another combat card, adding it to his hand. The Dracula and the hunter player again are going to each choose 1 combat card apiece. And then after every one of us chosen their combat cards, the combat cards are going to be revealed. And again, we're going to compare the banners and see if the effects have managed to be stopped or managed to be blocked off. So the hunter player played this card in the hopes that if Dracula decides to claw them, they're at least going to block the claw effect. Unfortunately, Dracula did not play a claw effect. He decided to play his fangs effect, which means he gets to remove 2 damage from himself and add those 2 damage back onto the hunter. Now, unfortunately, this person has now taken 6 points of damage, more than half of his life, and this vampire, this Dracula player, has managed to heal up a little bit. Now they're only down 5 life points. But at this point, now the rifle gets to go off, and its effect gets to hurt Dracula. So Dracula is going to take an additional 2 points of damage, so it's kind of a moot point as what he did earlier. At least he managed to put some more damage onto this hunter, so it's not too bad. So this card is then going to be placed face down to let us know that we've gone through 2 rounds of combat. Rifle stays down, and then this garlic card goes back into the hunter's hand. And now each one of our players, the hunter and Dracula, needs to figure out exactly which combat card they want to play for the 3rd combat round. After Dracula fills up his combat hand, back up to 5 cards again. Sorry, I'm cheating, grabbing too many cards here, unfortunately. After Dracula fills up his combat hand back up to 5 cards, Dracula and the hunter each need to decide exactly which card they want to play. Now, the Dracula player does have a Fangs card in their hand right now. Oops, sorry. They do have a Fangs card in their hand right now. But they also know that the hunter player also has their garlic card back in their hand right now, too. So they need to decide exactly what they want to do. We do have a couple options, and this is just going to show you how the Dracula player can figure out what they want to do. We have our claws card that we could play, which would possibly do some more damage to the hunter, but we do know the hunter does have garlic in his hand, so it could cause us problems. We could try to escape at this point as the Dracula player, because this will be the 3rd combat round, and since there's no despair tokens, it would be a valid tactic for us. We could also escape as a bat. We could use our strength, or we could use our fangs again on this hunter. But again, if we play fangs, or we play claws and they also play garlic, we're going to end up pretty much getting hurt. Now, while Lord Godalming is starting to take a little bit of damage, it's not enough for us to try to go toe-to-toe to him right now, especially since he has that rifle, especially since he has that garlic, and we know he can start hurting us pretty badly, pretty quickly. So we as a Dracula player know that pretty much our decision is pretty much made for us because strength is not going to cancel the garlic, and there's a pretty good chance that the hunter player is going to place garlic because it's going to defend him and allow us to do some more damage. And remember, if the hunters can do 15 points of damage to Dracula, Dracula will definitely be defeated. So instead of doing that, what Dracula is going to do is place the escape as bat card face down. Again, all these combat cards are placed face down. So the hunter and the Dracula player, nobody knows what the other team is playing. Each player is going to play their cards. The cards are going to be revealed in order, and then we're going to see if the symbols are going to cancel each other. But instead, we're going to play the escape as a bat card that says this combat ends immediately as long as we did not ignore Dracula's rage or Dracula's pride ability. And we're not, so this combat is going to end immediately, which means this garlic card is not going to go off. These combat cards are going to go back into the hunter's hand. We just need to quickly remember to discard the punch, remember to discard the dodge, and then to discard the escape card. The hunter gets these cards back, and then the escape as bat card is going to go off. So the nice thing about the escape as a bat card is it's going to allow us to move up to 2 cities away, and we get to move those cities in secret without the hunter players knowing exactly which one of the cities we move to. So now we get to, not only have we delayed a hunter, even though we took a little bit of damage, but we're now going to move up to 2 cities, again creating a lot of secrecy so the hunters have no idea exactly where we move to. So we're going to remove this location right here, which was a revealed location, so we don't mind revealing it and removing it. And now we get to pick a city that's up to 2 spaces away by road. So we can move to any one of these cities. They're 2 spaces away by road, trying to either get away from the hunters or move in for another attack versus the hunters if that's what we want to do. So the next thing we do is we place out the location where we currently happen to be at, and I made one small error there. The escape as bat card should be placed on top of that location. It does 2 things. One, it prevents me from using escape as a bat again until that card manages to slide all the way off the trail, go back into my hand of combat cards. It also reminds me that I've actually managed to move and make life much more difficult for the hunters. So this card does stay on top of that location, and then Dracula is now moved to that location, and that's going to be the end of this dusk. That's the end of the actions for the dusk. The only thing left to do is remove 1 fog token. This hunter stays delayed, and now we get to move on to the night phase. I think I've shown you enough gameplay now that you can figure out if this is going to be a game for you. I've shown you some combat between the hunters and between Dracula. I've shown you how the secret movement works, how the ambushes work, and how everything rolls together, including the event cards, all the special abilities, the item cards, and how everything rolls together to create this game that's going to have some ebbs and flows as Dracula decides to play some hidden movement and hide across the map, and when he decides to spring us traps and attack the hunters. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any comments or questions, as always, leave them in the YouTube comments down below. You can also email me at offtheshelfboardgamereviews. That's otsbgr@gmail.com. As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, and as always, please subscribe. Thanks for watching. Week of gameplay, you should be able to get a very good idea of what happens when a cat walks across the table, because you knew I said hit the record button, didn't you? You knew it. You hear it. You've trained yourself to hear the record button. Movement and cat, you're not allowed to jump on the table. You're not allowed. No, you can't do it. You're making my life difficult.